Hello everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. I am still deep in my obsession with the Greetery. So when they came out with their Valentine's products a few weeks ago, I had to grab all of the release. I couldn't resist. And this video is my first kind of experience with their release, their Valentine's products. So this is the Shortbread Shapes Scalloped Hearts embossing folder. And what I'm doing with this one is very similar to what I did with their previous holiday release for Christmas. There was a really pretty embossed frame that I used for a holiday card, and I wanted to use this one that has hearts all in it, even though the hearts won't be on the card, not these particular hearts. But I wanted to use this frame with another embossing folder that I used in a previous video. I thought it would just be perfect. So here are the dies that match that embossing folder. So right now what I'm doing on this scrap piece of cardstock, I think this is, I think it's maybe Nectar, not Nectar, but honeysuckle cards. No, it's got to be watermelon. It's watermelon cardstock from Concord and Ninth. What I'm doing now is I'm just making a template so that I can then cut out the frame before I emboss it. So I'm lining up those two outer die shapes, and then I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine. So after I've run that through, I have this frame that will serve as a template for the rest of my die cutting and embossing with this embossing folder and die set. So I'm going to take this frame here and I'm going to put it right on top of some Woodgrain cardstock. I'll have this particular cardstock that I'm using linked down below in the supplies. But then I'm taking those same dies and I'm kind of puzzle piecing them over the top of my watermelon frame and letting the die edge catch the edge of that cardstock. It kind of slots right into the cut area. And then I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine and it's going to cut the wood grain paper. Now, when I ran this through, it wasn't lined up perfectly, so I've got a little bit of that watermelon cardstock that was cut as well, but it worked just fine in the end. So I'm going to save that watermelon frame. I'll just store it with the dies, and I'm left with this wood grain, this brown wood grain cardstock cut into the frame that I need for this embossing folder. So I'm wiping the cardstock down with a baby wipe. This just dampens the surface of the paper. In the past, I've also used a spray bottle just to add a little bit of water, but I find that I have a little bit more control with the baby wipe. So that's what I've been doing recently. So I'm putting that in the embossing folder and lining that frame up the best that I can. And then I'm going to run it through my Platinum 6 die cutting machine. Now, when it comes to embossing folders, I prefer to use a Platinum for this because Spellbinders has that universal platform system and it works really well for these 3D embossing folders. So when it comes to embossing the frame, I'm going to emboss one side, roll it back through, and then I'll flip my die cutting sandwich around and I will run the other side through the die cutting machine as well. And the reason you do this is because sometimes when you do kind of a thinner frame like this with an embossing folder, it will stretch the paper and then your die cut frame won't line up with the embossing folder anymore. So this just helps mitigate some of that problem. So there I am with the finished frame and it's just beautiful. So I'm actually going to set this one aside for a moment and work on another frame that's going to go right below this frame. And it will look very familiar because this is the same set of products I used for my holiday product. This time I'm adding the Capsule Fixed Borders Large Die, and I'm using it with the Rosemal Reflections embossing folder. So I first cut out the frame, and then I'm going to be using that frame in the embossing folder. And by using that capsule frame to cut out this wood grain frame, it just saves me a step. You could also do the same thing, what I did with the very first embossing folder, just create a template. But I already had the dies, so I decided to use them. So I wiped it down with the baby wipe and then lined it up in the embossing folder. And I'm going to do exactly what I did the first time. I'm going to run it through the die cutting machine just halfway, and then I'm going to remove it from the die cutting machine, flip the die cutting sandwich, and then run it through the other direction. So like I said, this just helps keep that paper inside from warping or stretching too much. I have had that happen in the past, so I was really happy to see this tip in a video from Betsy Veldman over at the Greetery. So here's that frame all die cut. And at this point, I discovered that that circle scallop shape on the top frame is a little bit too wide for that Rosemal Reflections frame down below that I cut. So I decided, you know what, I need to have a card base, like a front for my card anyway. So I cut that outer shape out of the Woodgrain cardstock again, as well as some white for the back of the card. And we will assemble the card here when we have more of our pieces all completed. Now I'm using the Whole-Hearted die. It's a big cover plate die that's 5x7, cuts out a ton of hearts. And I'm going to cut all of these hearts out of 3 colors of cardstock. Eventually on the finished card, I only use 2 colors, but I'm going to go ahead and do 3 here. I've got Nectar, Grapefruit, and Sorbet from Concord and Ninth. So I cut out a bunch of those hearts, and then I lined them up inside the embossing folder that matches. And I just used a little bit of washi tape to hold these hearts inside the embossing folder. And then when I brought them through the die cutting machine, everything was embossed beautifully. Now my washi tape was very, very sticky, and it was a little bit hard to remove from the back of the hearts. So for most of these, I just ended up using my scissors and just kind of running them along the edge of the heart to remove the washi tape. Not a huge problem. I did test out using Easy C tape, and that worked a little bit better. You can see right there, that blue tape. It worked a little bit better with Easy C tape, but all in all, not a huge deal because the back of the heart won't be seen. So now I'm taking some ground espresso distress ink and a blending brush, and I'm adding some dark brown ink over the top of the embossed areas on the frames. This is really going to emphasize the design on the frame. I think it's just so beautiful. I love the bow here. And I'm also really excited about the fact that that die set that I used to cut out this frame also includes the bow. So if you wanted to die cut a bow and then emboss it, you absolutely could. It matches up. So I'm running that ground espresso over everything on the frame. And then I'm going to bring in the second frame. This is the other frame that goes underneath. And I'm adding that ink on this frame as well. Now, because this frame is cut a little bit too small for the actual card, I'm actually going to do some ink blending on my card front. So this is just that plain wood grain piece that I cut, and only the sides on the long sides will be shown. So I just added the ink blending just right there on the sides. I'm now assembling my frames. So I'm adding some liquid glue kind of to the inner edge of the frame and also the outer, and did a few little squiggles all throughout. And then I'm going to position this kind of right in the center of the card front and kind of move that around until it looks about right. I then added a bunch of foam tape. This is some narrow foam tape or foam strips from scrapbook.com. This is the 2mm thickness. And I added that all the way around this frame. I think I probably could have skipped this step, especially because that white foam tape really does show quite a bit when you tip the card on its side. I think I probably could have just glued this frame down directly, but I did like how much it popped it up. There's a little bit of foam tape kind of showing near the top, so I did trim that off a little bit smaller. Now, when it comes to actually making this into a card, I'm going to take my white piece of cardstock and I'm going to score just along the side. I'm giving it about 1/2 inch to create that fold. So I'm just scoring that right there, and I'll fold it back. And then I'm going to take my tape runner adhesive. You could also use a very strong tape, something like a score tape or like tape from Lawn Fawn or whatever, red line tape, and just adding that right along that edge that I've scored, making sure it doesn't overlap into the plain area. Then I'm lining up these two pieces by the other end that doesn't have the score on it, getting that lined up, and then pressing that adhesive into my card front. So now I have a card that opens and closes. Super easy to do with these shaped cards. So as far as the hearts go, I was trying to decide which hearts to use, and I decided on these two. I believe these hearts are Sorbet and Grapefruit. And then I'm going to use the Filigree Hearts dies to add some gold accents. I'm using matte foil cardstock in gold from Griffin. And I run that through my die cutting machine, and then I have these beautiful gold frames that match up with my hearts. There's actually a third heart in the die set that's larger, but I didn't need that large heart today, so I only cut the two smaller. Now, when it comes to the embossed hearts, I wanted to emphasize the embossed design just like I did on the brown woodgrain cardstock. So now I'm taking some Sorbet ink and just inking up this heart. That was a test one to see how it looked. I liked how it looked, so then I went to the smaller heart that I'm planning to use on the card. And I just brought in that ink all over this heart. Now, I absolutely love the scalloped edge on this heart. So I was sort of sad that I would lose it by putting the gold frame on top, but I really do like that filigree kind of border frame. So I decided to sacrifice the scallop, even though I really do love it. I'll have to use it on a different card sometime. I started out using Sorbet on top of the Sorbet cardstock, but then I realized it wasn't dark enough. So I brought in some cayenne ink, and cayenne is kind of like the next step up, the next color darker in this Concord and Night color family. And that really brought out all of that embossing, and it looks really, really beautiful. I like how it emphasizes all of that texture. So after I had the cayenne ink applied to this larger heart, I then adhered the gold frames onto each one of these hearts. So I just used a little bit of glue for that. I'm using some Honeybee precision glue, and I actually put it underneath a paperweight to hold it down while it dried onto the heart. And then I did that with the smaller heart as well. So this is all coming together really beautifully. At this point, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do for a greeting. I think if you wanted to leave it plain without a greeting, that would look great as well. But I decided to bring in the Simple Valentine Mini Sentiments stamp set that came out in the same release. Why not, right? So I stamped the XOXO Hugs and Kisses stamp onto some Nectar cardstock, and I used Sorbet ink for that. And I just made sure to stamp it 3 times until I got a nice impression with the stamp. And then I trimmed it out with my scissors until it was just a nice rectangular shape. All right, so now it's time to start putting the whole card together. So I first applied some foam tape to the back of the large heart, and then I positioned it kind of in the center, a little bit off to the left, and then put foam tape on the smaller heart. And I doubled up the foam tape on the side that is off the large heart, just so it would stay nice and level. I then put foam tape behind the greeting, and then place that right below the hearts, kind of overlapping just a tiny bit onto that smaller heart. So this is the finished card for today. I think it's so beautiful, definitely different from my usual style. I sometimes like to just dabble in different styles, and it looks really, really fun. So all of the supplies I used today are linked down below in the video description, including all of the embossing folders, the dies, the paper, the cardstock, and the inks. So if you're wondering about anything I've used today, check out the supplies down below. And thank you so much for watching. I'll be back here on YouTube tomorrow night for a live mail call. I'll be opening the mail. We've got lots of heart-themed cards coming in, and that live mail call will happen at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. I hope to see you there, and thanks so much for watching.